The Fleur de Lis Heritage Centre in Preston Street, Faversham, was completely redesigned and enlarged in 2002. It is owned and run by the Faversham Society on an entirely voluntary basis. It is essentially a community effort, run by the community for the community. On the ground floor there is a shop and tourist information centre. There is also a gallery for showing art and heritage exhibitions and museum displays on Faversham from the earliest times. On the first floor there are fascinating displays that give a vivid experience of life in Faversham over the last 2 centuries. The first display recreates a typical schoolroom dating from the late Victorian period until the end of the Second World War in 1945. The basic teaching tool was the blackboard. Maps and pictures emphasised the importance of the British Empire, and much of the teaching was by rote. Pupils wrote on foolscap paper slightly larger than A4. Every morning, ink monitors filled the pupils' individual inkwells from large glass bottles. Even as late as 1945, writing on slates was still common in some schools. Discipline in the classroom was strict, and frequent use of the cane was not uncommon. Next to the schoolroom display is the hub of the Victorian household, the kitchen. It was often below ground level with a separate tradesman's entrance for food deliveries. There were few labour-saving devices. The day would begin perhaps as early as 5 a.m, with the scullery maid lighting the fire in the kitchen range. After the First World War, living standards rose and fewer people were prepared to go into service. A wide range of domestic appliances made life easier, and the kind of kitchen displayed here slowly disappeared. During the Boer Wars, the Faversham district schools were encouraged to make calico garments for the British soldiers. A local schoolmistress, Ellen Epps, cut up leftover material with the help of her pupils and invited her friends and family to sign them. Many added rhymes and pictures, and when all the pieces were sewn together into a counterpane, it became in effect a giant autograph album with 271 names. She gave it as a wedding present to her fiancé, Harry Steedman, the headmaster's son, and they used it throughout their married life. The 20th century saw 2 devastating world wars, and like the rest of the country, the men and women of Faversham were involved either in active service or in supporting the war effort on the home front. Modern warfare methods necessitated the formation of new units, such as fire watchers, air raid wardens, and first aid parties. Following an appeal for local defence against the possibility of enemy invasion, the Home Guard was formed in 1940. Faversham and district managed to raise over 2,000 men divided into 10 companies. Raising money to help buy a Spitfire was something everyone could do.
Hello. Probably, don't know. Daniel, look, you've got all the ration books. Hi. Ration books down here. Oh, yeah.
Opposite the kitchen displays are examples of leisure and entertainment. For Victorian children, a magic lantern show with a variety of hand-painted or photographic slides was the height of sophisticated entertainment. It was not until the 1950s that the first television sets were widely available to the general public. With only a 9-inch screen, a large magnifying glass was mounted on the front of the cabinet to make the image appear bigger. Before television, radio was the only broadcast medium. In the home, board games were always popular, and during the 1920s and 30s, these reflected the growing interest in motoring. Even as late as the 1950s, wind-up gramophones were in common use. Part of the museum is laid out to look like 5 of the town's shops that were once important but have since ceased to trade. Using many of the real artefacts donated or rescued when the shops closed down, they may look familiar to many older Faversham residents. Jesse Luckhurst worked as a hairdresser in the town for over 60 years. He set up his first barber's shop at 68 West Street. After his marriage in 1924, he moved to number 46, where he remained in business until he retired, aged 83. He became an institution, providing excellent service, but rarely updating his equipment. The heavy chairs, cast-iron footrest, porcelain sink, and mahogany cabinet where he kept his razors and the other tools of his trade were in daily use for over half a century. Faversham's first sub-post office opened in Preston Street in 1887. Like today's sub-offices, it was part of an existing shop, and the postal section was run under licence by the shop owner. This was convenient for customers who might find getting to the main or Crown office in town difficult. In 1921, the business was run by J.L. Wyard, who sold a variety of goods and ran a private lending library, as well as running the post office counter. Opposite Wyard's in the museum display is a facsimile of 2 other well-known Faversham shops, Josky's Sweet Shop and the Pharmacy, which since the 1920s was run by Thomas Joseph Thomas. As well as offering advice, dispensing prescriptions or over-the-counter remedies, Thomas sold a bewildering variety of medical, dental and photographic equipment. He retired in 1950 and the shop is no longer a pharmacy. However, the familiar pestle and mortar sign still dominates the shop's elegant Georgian frontage at number 6 Market Place. With the end of the Second World War, food rationing began to be lifted. For Faversham children, this meant at last they could buy sweets from Mr. Josky's shop without coupons. His sweet shop occupied half of the frontage of number 76 Preston Street, just opposite the present Heritage Centre.
I like the squares. They look like anyway. I like them. Oh, they look like they say must be up. After every meal. That's a new one.
Henry Ross Child, an enterprising young draper from Pembrokeshire, started a new business in tiny premises at 15 Court Street. He soon expanded, buying number 15 and number 12.
Daniel, doesn't it? Look at this.
His business was so successful that in 1899 he rebuilt number 12, and this distinctive building still dominates the Court Street skyline. The business closed in 1971. The museum has numerous other exhibits which offer a fascinating glimpse into the town's past. Civic and ceremonial artefacts illustrate facets of the council, fire service and organisations such as the Freemasons. In 1829, Sir Robert Peel formed the Bow Street Runners, and their success led to the creation of the Faversham Police Force 10 years later. The varied sporting life of the town is represented by a small display, dominated by a fine penny-farthing bicycle, which testifies to the popularity of cycling as a leisure activity. There were many other sports. Some are no longer familiar, such as goal running and roller hockey. But football, golf and cricket were all played as enthusiastically as they are today. One of the town's most famous sons captained England in the first Test matches against Australia towards the end of the 19th century. He was the fourth Lord Harris, who had a private cricket ground at Belmont. One of the first exhibits at the top of the stairs is the Polonaise dress, which was worn between 1770 and 1780. It is made of silk brocade and is in remarkable condition for a garment made over 220 years ago. In a very small area, the displays and recreations offer the visitor an informative, interesting and often nostalgic glimpse of Faversham's past. The creation of the displays would have been impossible without the generosity of local people who have presented treasures for the museum collection. Anyone who is interested in the conservation of the area and its artefacts is welcome to join the Faversham Society.